Thank you for joining us today. I am Kristen Bittinger. I'm the account manager for Illinois for mid-market districts. So that's about 1,000 to 6,000 worth of student enrollment. My colleague Stephen Weniger is going to be joining us shortly. He is actually headed out to a meeting right now to meet with the school district. So he's going to be joining us here momentarily. And but the reason we're all here and excited today is to hear what Dr. Colleen Cannon-Rufo has to say in her research of all the Illinois standards, especially related to computer science, but in other areas. So without further ado, I will kick it over to her so she can introduce herself and get us started.
Perfect. Thank you, Christy. I appreciate it. So my name is Colleen Cannon-Rufo. I am a solution architect with LEGO Education. What that means is I get to work with Christy and Stephen and Steph and many other account managers across the Midwest and the Northeast to make sure that whatever solutions that we are proposing for a school or a district really fit the curricular vision and goals for that district. So I have a background in education, specifically in the state of Illinois. I spent 30 years in the public schools here and left a year and a half ago to come, 2 years now, Christy, time flies, to come work for LEGO Education. I started as a teacher, moved from there and into the role of technology integration specialist, and then from there into the role of a project manager at the district office. Most of my projects were related to STEM, robotics, educational technology. And within that capacity, I spent the last 2 decades using LEGO Education Solutions. So that's what brought me to where I am today. I have been blessed to really enjoy everything I've done in my career. And it has been amazing to move into this role and kind of see what we can do for schools and districts across the state of Illinois. So with that in mind, I'm going to kind of move into the slide that talks about who we are. Some people are familiar with LEGO Education, others don't even know we exist. So I like to take a few seconds to talk about the fact that LEGO Education is that division of the LEGO Group, right? That company that most people are familiar with that has all those sets on the stores, in the stores at Walmart and Costco and Target. That is us. That's our parent company. We are the division under that parent company that exists for you, that exists for educators. We actually exist because of educators who came to LEGO and said, hey, we love your product. We love your toy. We want to put this into the classroom, but we need to do it intentionally. So can we have some support with that? That's when we got into the business of education. That's when we started creating models that were based on these concepts, and then the lessons and units that wrap around them. All of these are wrapped around the academic standard. Nothing we develop gets developed unless there's an academic standard that it can wrap around. I like to show this slide. When we at LEGO Education see a pile of bricks, we do not see just bricks. What we see is a medium. We see a means of communication, a way of a student being able to demonstrate their learning or reflect on an understanding. It's something that you can use to ideate or create or prototype, right? And we just see it so much more than just a toy. It's a teaching and learning tool. So our mission at LEGO Education is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow, enabling every student to succeed. We take that term very seriously. We know we started in an after-school space. We know we started in those summer school programs, but we truly believe that all children should have access to the type of learning that comes with learning with LEGO. And that's why we're working very hard to make sure that whatever we develop fits in that core curriculum so that all students can benefit from that type of learning. So why are we here today? We wanted to talk to you about the standards in Illinois and how our hands-on learning hits those standards. I thought I'd start with this slide. One of my colleagues shared this with us back in the fall. This was an issue of Educational Leadership, the magazine Educational Leadership, called the 10 biggest challenges that are facing education. And they went through and had an article related to each of these challenges, right? And we know there are quite a few challenges to education today, right? What struck me about these challenges was the fact that these are the same challenges that were articulated at a conference that I went to for superintendents. So they really were kind of hitting in on the things that are kind of challenging teachers today. We believe at LEGO Education that we can hit at least half of these challenges through the use of our products, right? So teacher recruitment and retention, that's a problem in education. Student behavioral issues, student focus and engagement in the classroom. Teachers have too much on their plate, and sometimes schools are stuck in outdated models of learning, right? With LEGO Education, we believe that we can help address some of those issues. How can we do that? Part of it is because we're pretty unique, right? The fact is that we have a product that allows us to help students bring concepts that they're studying to life, right? Through the build of that model. It's that hands-on active engagement that's going to happen for students that's really going to help them see what it is that they're learning and kind of feel what that concept entails. We have built scaffolding into our products for both the teacher and the student. We recognize that not all teachers teach all concepts or have a background in all concepts. So we have made sure that we have developed comprehensive lesson plans that include that background knowledge that they need to be successful to teach it. But our app is also intuitive. That allows the student to work at their own pace so that they can progress through and really allow that teacher to be a facilitator of their learning rather than that sage on the stage. Our learning experiences are based on real world applications and phenomena so that students aren't just studying something for fun's sake, but that they're really digging into that real world application that it can use. And finally, that idea of low floor, limitless possibilities, and I'll kind of touch on that as we go throughout the presentation. But the fact is, nobody walks into the classroom with a LEGO education solution and the kids go, "Oh, darn, we have to learn with LEGO today." It really is that low floor because they see something they know, they love, they're familiar with, and they get excited about it. And that really allows you to go places with it. And that is true for both the students and the teachers. I have had teachers who get so excited when we come in, they're like, "Okay, we get to teach with LEGO today." So we really, in addressing that teacher recruitment and retention, part of it is bringing joy back to the classroom for the teacher, not just the students, right? So where do we fit in LEGO Education, right? Where can we fit in that classroom experience? Let's see if I can get my slide to move forward for us. There we go. I think you can see that we fit in all kinds of places, right? Teachers are using LEGO Education resources in early childhood classrooms. They're using them in science classrooms, computer science classrooms, and robotics, both within the school day and after the school day. CTE, college and career readiness classes, in math classes, in STEAM classrooms, in social emotional learning. So we have instances of people using these in both formal and informal learning situations across the school day, which is pretty amazing when you think about it, because if we look at this from a standards perspective, where do we fit with the standards, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click forward, and hopefully this will work the way it's supposed to. Come on. There we go. So we know that in Illinois, we have early childhood learning standards, right? We also have the science standards, and those science standards can be found in our science classrooms and in our STEAM and STEM classrooms. We have math standards in the state of Illinois. Those math standards are addressed in math classes and also in those STEAM and STEM courses. We have English and language arts standards in the state of Illinois, and you can absolutely see that in those STEM classrooms, as well as social emotional learning standards, right? So those standards would be addressed with our lessons that are based on social emotional learning. Computer science shows up in STEAM, it shows up in robotics, it shows up in computer science, and it shows up in CTE and college and career readiness. We have computer science standards in the state of Illinois that we can address with those. We have the English language learning and bilingual education standards as well, and those can be addressed in so many of these subjects. And then finally, just kind of giving you a glimpse, these are our Illinois learning standards. When I think back to that challenge of teachers have too much on their plates, we have a lot of standards we need to teach. We can't keep asking teachers to keep adding one more thing, adding one more thing. So how do we get them to be able to address? We put resources in front of them that allow them to address multiple standards at once. And I think that's where we really excel at LEGO Education. We've looked at how we can take these concepts and give students the opportunity to apply these skills within their classroom and hit multiple standards all at the same time. Besides the standards, we know that there are also computer science courses that can be delivered within the state of Illinois. So that course, computer science principles and computer programming other languages can be addressed by use of our Foundations of Physical Computing course, as well as our Python 1 and our Python 2. So we are working hard to make sure that we are providing teachers with the resources they need to be able to address the standards and the courses that are needed to be taught in Illinois. I thought I'd take a second to kind of delve a little bit into why do we even need computer science education, right? Those are not a priority standard in the state of Illinois, but they are absolutely standards that have been adopted and they're expected to be taught in the state. And part of the reason why they need to be taught is because there's such a need for students to have this background. We know that over the next 10 years, we are going to see a significant shift in the distribution of job categories. This actually comes from the McKinsey report on the future of work. And basically what they said is we're going to see some job categories that grow, but because of automation and AI, we are going to absolutely see other job categories that shrink. And that includes some job categories within technology itself, right? Technology will not be unaffected by these job shifts that are happening. We also know that the pandemic accelerated these trends, right? That because of what we've learned about remote work and e-commerce and automation, that this shift is happening even faster than we expected it to. But it's not just the work itself that's going to be impacted by automation. It's also the type of work that they're going to be doing. It's going to prompt some changes that are going to take place in the complexity of the work itself. Higher skills are going to be demanded even for entry-level jobs. On top of that, we're going to need those emotional intelligences that come as well, those soft skills that students have in perseverance, collaboration, empathy. Those are the skills that make us uniquely human, right? And those skills are going to be just as important in the workforce. But one last thing that's important is how fast they're going to be able, that our employees are going to need to be able to shift in this new economy, right? That idea that things are changing that rapidly, that they're going to have to be able to adapt and be even more resilient to keep up with those changes, right? And we also know that they're changing jobs more often, so they need to be more able to adapt to those changes as well. So how are we doing with computer science? When we think about this nationally, right, we know that thanks to code.org, they've done some great data collection, and we know that 29 states have adopted a policy which gives all high school students access to computer science courses. 29 is good, but it's not where we need to be. We need to get a little bit further, right? At this point, 57.5% of public high schools offer at least one computer science course nationally. But look at the number of open computing jobs nationwide, 354,000, right? And we're only graduating 90,942 computer science students. This was last year from 2023, this data, into the workforce. We are not filling the jobs that are out there, and that is a problem. States are recognizing this. As I study the various standards across the states and the different policies from state to state, the states are recognizing the need to develop the workforce so that we don't lose the students in our states to other states who also need those same graduates. So there is definitely a need that's out there that is not being hit. Code.org has actually put together some recommendations of 9 different things that need to happen in order to make computer science fundamental to K-12 education, including creating a state plan, defining standards, allocating funding, right? All of these things need to be in place in order for a state to be able to really make it possible for students to have access to these things. So let's take a look at Illinois, dig a little deeper, right? We were talking about 57.5% of high schools offer at least one computer science course. In Illinois, that number is 54%. So we're just a little under that national average. When you look at the number of open computing jobs in Illinois last year, there were 16,400 of them. The average salary of these jobs is $107,000. So if we can make sure to educate the students with what they need to know, we can help them get into those higher paying jobs that are going to sustain them throughout their lifetime. So then you take a look at the data in comparison to the other states around us. We're doing better than some, right? But not quite as well as others. Look at that statistic for Indiana. 91% of students have access to computer science courses in the public high schools of Indiana, right? We're getting there. But we definitely have a ways to go in Illinois. So I think it's important to kind of see ourselves in the context of our neighbors as well. When you look at us nationwide, almost at the middle, right? So we're getting there. But essentially we've got a little bit of room for growth there too. But when I looked at the data a little more deeply, one of the things I noticed was that in Illinois, only 6.2% of high school students are taking foundational computer science, and that's as of 21-22, right? Of those 6.2%, only 36% were female. So if we want that to reflect our population, we need to increase that number as well. I did like this fact when I compared it to other states that I looked at. Students of all racial and ethnic groups are similarly likely to take computer science in the state of Illinois. That's not normal. Across most states, there is a difference. So that was really cool to see from a person who lives in the state of Illinois. But we definitely have some room to grow when it comes to rural versus rural and small schools versus the urban and suburban. So just wanted to kind of share with you some of the stats that are out there about computer science in the state of Illinois. We do have standards. That's the cool part, right? We have taken the time to put together and define rigorous K-12 computer science standards, and that's huge. They are based on the K-12 computer science framework, just like the national standards are. We actually have one more domain in Illinois that doesn't exist in the national standards. I think it's pretty forward-thinking. It's the one surrounding emerging and future technologies. So that's kind of exciting to see that we have these standards and that there's been some really good thought behind putting them together. We are also finally starting to see an allocation of funding for computer science. There is this Illinois Computer Science Equity Grant. The application was due, I think it was April 4th in the state of Illinois. But basically, it's the legislature has approved funding for up to $3 million subject to their appropriations. And there will be annual grant awards that will range from $10,000 to a maximum of $330,000 per year. That can make a significant shift in a school district. So it isn't until states start putting that funding behind these initiatives that we start to see those shifts. So I am really excited to see that this is happening in the state of Illinois. So how can LEGO help hit these standards? How can we help address this with our students? I'm going to quickly show you our integrated continuum of learning. I'm going to skip past that video real quickly so that you can see our LEGO learning system. Our learning system starts in the kindergarten level and it goes all the way through secondary, right? Pre-K kindergarten and then all the way through secondary. And I like to say beyond. Christy and I have worked with universities to even implement our solutions in the universities. Starting with Storytales, Coding Express, and Steam Park in that elementary level, in the kindergarten level, moving to Spike Essential, BrickUmotion Essential in that elementary primary level, and then from there into Spike Prime and BrickUmotion Prime in the secondary level. Essentially, what we've built is a system of learning that mimics our system of play, right? LEGO developed a toy that basically was a system of play, something that you could use over and over. You could build into different things, right? It's not just something you take off the shelf, use once and put back. Same thing with our system of learning, right? It's that idea that you're going to have this solution, this kit that contains all the elements that you need for multiple lessons so that you can address so many of these standards that we have. When you look at this line, the solutions above the line are our digital solutions. The solutions below the line are non-digital solutions. So they don't have that app associated with them. I also like to show what that solution could look like from this perspective. It's all contained in that one box. I think about that challenge when we're talking about the challenges to teachers and how teachers have so much on their plate. We need to give them simple resources, efficient resources, right? Everything you need to teach for all of these different lessons comes from that one kit, and it's organized so beautifully. I threw all of these models in to show how many you could build, and this isn't even the half of them, right? It's that idea that you can build all of these different models, all of which have a lesson that's wrapped around an academic standard or 2 or 3, right? All coming from that same kit. You don't need different things in order to teach them. So I like to share that, and it just kind of give people a sense of everything that can come from that one powerful resource. So what do our lessons look like? I have so many favorites. Christy, don't laugh. I know I say this is one of my favorites, but it is. They're all my favorite. This one's called the Fast Lane, and I'm going to play it real quickly. You won't hear the sound, but basically, in this one, they're building a fast lane, an entry to an amusement park or to an amusement ride, right? And the student has the fast pass that gets them through, and they don't have to wait in the line. They show it to the color sensor, and then from there, they program it so that it gives a message with that light matrix and says, green light, you get to go in, you have the fast pass. It's an adorable little lesson, right? It's fun for the kids to build. But think about the computer science concepts behind this. The kids are programming, and they're programming a sensor, and that sensor is taking an input from the environment and then doing a behavior based on that input, right? So I like to show this graphic. Once the students learn how to address the challenge, which is to program that yellow ticket to allow them to get in through the fast lane, you then teach them how to duplicate and start customizing so that they can do the same thing with all the other different color tickets, right? Students in first grade are starting to do parallel programming with all these different program strings. Not only that, they can use that little green block there to capture and collect the data and then start having conversations and analyzing that data. So you can see the graph here. And this is where I love getting the kids to talk about, well, how many red tickets did we collect? How many yellow tickets did we collect? How many more red tickets than yellow tickets? How many tickets altogether? And you start to see all that rich math conversation take place. And that's just for this one lesson. And there's multiple lessons that are similar that have that color sensor that allow the students to build that graphing element directly into it. And then once the teachers learned how to do that, let them kind of go off and say, well, what else could we collect data on? And what kind of model would we need to build in order to illustrate that type of collection of data? That's just first grade. Then you start looking at all of the different standards that are addressed within that. And I'll pop that slide up real fast. And you can see we have math standards, we have computer science standards, we have the emerging technology standards, right? All of those addressed within that one lesson. That's what I talk about when I say, how can we help teachers address all those things that they need to do? We put one lesson in front of them and we take multiple things off that plate at one time. This is another one of my favorites. Another one of my favorite lessons, energy resources. This is an example of one of our science lessons. In this one, the students are building a wind turbine. And in building that wind turbine, they can follow our inspiration model and build it exactly like this, or they can actually build one of their own, or perhaps they want to illustrate a different type of renewable energy resource. Because it's science, it's a little more open-ended in terms of what they're going to build. But we're going to give them some code that they're going to work with so that they're embedding computer science into those science concepts. When they build it, they get all excited and, they sit there and they click play and they wait for something to happen and nothing happens. And that's where I get excited, because what the kids thought they were building was a fan. And we weren't building a fan, we were building a wind turbine. It works differently from a fan. So finally, someone starts to kind of turn the blades, and as they turn the blades, that little light matrix on the bottom starts to glow. Faintly at first, but the faster they turn the blades, the more it starts to glow. And this wind turbine model does a great job of illustrating abstraction, right? It's that idea that they're representing a complex idea like a wind turbine, which doesn't work because it turns like a fan. It works because that invisible force of wind is acting on those blades and turning those blades, which is converting that energy into electricity, right? So now we've dispelled that misconception that they had about how wind turbines work, and they've learned about the concept. And they've done that by programming it. And they're using sensors, and they're using loops, and they're using motors. And you can even have them plot the speed of that blade so that you can bring that math concept back into it, right? By using the block that has them plotting the speed to the line of a line graph. So this is where I get excited, because look at all the different standards you can address just by doing that one model, right? You don't have to focus on all of them at once. You can highlight the ones that your students need to use, but the idea is that it's there and that you can really build on it. And at the same time, we're embedding those computer science standards that may not be mandated, but we definitely need the students to be able to learn. I also wanted to point out that we have new lessons. We have all of these lessons already on our website, but what we've done, and that's coming out mid-May, is extensions on top of those lessons. And those extension lessons have been built around the A in STEAM and the M in STEAM. So we're really trying to enhance and pull out the math in these lessons and the ELA in these lessons so that teachers can dig deeper into those concepts of literacy and math that we know are so important for students to really grasp and understand. And those lessons are coming out in mid-May, like I said, and we're going to be starting to align those to all the various state standards as well. I love that they've taken those same lessons that already existed and they've really delved deeper into them so that we can help teachers figure out how to call out those standards more specifically. So I'm looking at the time. Christy, can you give me a heads up in terms of how much time we have left?
Yeah, we're actually good for a whole hour for this session. If we finish a little bit early, we'll definitely leave time for questions. But while we're at a pause point, I am going to drop a link in the chat just in case anyone does want PD hours for this through our amazing friends at the LTCI. So I'm going to drop that in the chat now. And yeah, so just refer back to that when everything is ready. And I will turn it back over to you, Kelly.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. I am going to go ahead and go on. This is another lesson that we do, and I'm going to go ahead and play that video. This is our taxi. Whoops, sorry. Turn that off. This is our taxi lesson. So these students are building a little taxi, and then once they've built the taxi, they learn how to get it to move forward and turn, basically. Once they've learned how to get it to move forward and turn, that's the basis for the challenge, and the challenge is to get it to go through a specific path or a specific route. So they start pulling those components in, remixing the program until they have modified and basically given that address that challenge of getting that taxi to move a specific distance. I love how much math is built into this, right? That idea that they're going to be looking at code that can be based on rotations. It can be set based on centimeters. It can be based on inches. So it really lets us work with different units of measure. But on top of that, when we talk about rotations, right, it's that idea that that motor is going to spin around in a circle in order to rotate once, and then they can start thinking about, well, how many rotations would it take to go a specific distance? How many rotations would it take to go, 50 centimeters? And then you start bringing in the multiplication and division in order to have those conversations. You'll see that there's even decimal points in here, right? I've done this lesson in classrooms where students are given a specific distance they need the taxi to travel. And I've had students come up to me and say, well, it doesn't work. And I'm like, why? And the student will say to me, well, I programmed it to go 3 rotations and that was too far. But if I program it to go 2, that's not far enough. I'm like, well, what else could you program? And I had a student say to me, well, there's no numbers between 2 and 3. And that's when you just want to go, whoa, what are you talking about? And then finally, the student behind them goes, well, what about fractions? You know, and then you're like, oh, that's right. And then that same student goes, but I can't do that because there's no way to put 1/2 in the calculator. Well, then you have to start talking about decimal equivalents, right? And this was in a high-performing school district in a 5th grade classroom where I know they learned fractions, I know they learned decimal equivalents, but they'd never been given that opportunity to apply that type of learning. And I think that's what we do beautifully as well. We bring these models to life, we bring these concepts to life, so they're actually applying what they're learning. And you can see all the different standards that would be addressed, both in computer science, but also in the math standards as well. That's our taxi model. There's a similar model that we can do in 6th through 8th grade, and you can see the code gets a little more complex here, right? Where students are learning how to get this driving base to move, but now we're not just looking at getting it to move specific distances. We're also looking at how we can set the gyro sensor inside of it so that they're using the yaw within that gyro sensor to program specific angles that it's going to turn. And this is where I get excited to see the complexity of code and how it grows as they're using this over time, right? So we give them that challenge. We say, all right, we want you to program it to go in a square, and then what do they need to change within that code to get it to do that? So just different examples of lessons that you can do. This is another lesson I love for the 6th through 8th grade level called This is Uphill. And in this lesson, they've created this little motorbike, and the motorbike is programmed to go forward, basically, right? But their challenge then is to watch what happens as this motorbike goes up a ramp. And as it's collecting the data, they watch the data build on that line graph. And this is where I get excited, because it's not about teaching a child how to use a motorbike, right? It's really about how do you read data? How do you collect that data? And then what do each of those points represent on that line graph so that they can kind of figure out how to read the story behind the data, right? How to analyze that data. And I remember when I was doing this with one of my friends, he then pulled up another line graph that he had created with his model, and he said, okay, what's the bike doing right here, Colleen? And I said, well, you didn't show me the video. I don't know what it's doing. And that's when he said, well, analyze the data. If you look, you can tell me. And that's when I looked at it a little more closely. I'm like, it's going downhill, right? So even though I hadn't seen what the bike did, I could read the data, having had this experience, and then figure out where to take it from there. So this is the type of thing that we call abstraction in computer science. It's that ability to use a model or a simulation to represent a complex idea or concept that's hard for kids to understand. Line graphs and how those line graphs work and how you analyze that data is not always easy for all kids. So, different ideas on how our lessons work to address the concepts, the standards in the state of Illinois, right? But I also want to show that it's not just in isolation. LEGO does a beautiful job of designing our learning so that it is part of that larger system of learning, right? That we are going to build a concept where students are going to study forces in motion and what happens when we place an object on a ramp, and how does gravity pull that object down, right? And students are making those observations at that pre-K kindergarten level, but then we build a similar type of resource when we're in grades 2 through 5 with the bobsled activity, and then we move even further into ski slope. And you can see how that progression of learning really builds on itself as you move throughout that system of learning. Same thing is true for our progression of learning within Spike Essential and our Spike products, right? The technology ones. We start them with physical programming with action bricks in that pre-K kindergarten world. From there, we move into icon blocks, which are not dependent on reading skills for our emergent readers. They read horizontally left to right in that type of programming. But from there, we move into word blocks, and they're going to be using a vertical stack now, and there are words involved in that. But the best part is we can now get to Python, because we have a Python API built into our app so that students who are ready for it can start to do text-based programming with using that Python programming language. Whether you're offering a course that's Python specific for all, or you're just taking those experiences and you're allowing them to differentiate based on what they're ready for, it's all within one app, so it's easy enough to do. And then you can see that progression of learning concepts and skills that goes through here as well. Starting in pre-K 1, you see the 2 different models, that FastLane that we looked at earlier, and there's our little train that has a sensor on the bottom that reads the different action bricks and does different things depending on where it is. And then we take that same idea of a sensor and we build on it in grade 5 when we build our trash monster machine. And they build a trash monster that can basically look at the type of trash that's coming into it and make decisions because of that color sensor to do different things. And then from there, we go even further with our Automate It, where they have a quality check robot, and that quality check robot does different things depending on what it sees with the color sensor. And hopefully what you're seeing is that progression of coding that goes along with it as well, so that those students are really being brought through all these different elements that they can be using to program these models that they're building. I get very excited, obviously, when I talk about these things and when I see that progression, because we've really done such a nice job of listening to what teachers need, right? With LEGO Education, and saying, how can we get those students to go even further with the type of lesson design that we have? I think that's one of the things I like to point out too, is that when LEGO improves its product, it doesn't just improve the product, it also improves the pedagogy behind the product. And they do that because they take the time to come into the classrooms and listen to the teachers. I think I saw a question there that just popped up. I know Christy's doing an amazing job of addressing the questions as you have them. I will point out that these LEGO Education solutions are non-consumable, right? So once you purchase them, they're yours for life. Our curriculum is free, our app is free, there are no subscription costs. So if you purchase them for use in the classroom, you can use them for summer programming. If you purchase them for summer programming, you can use them for after school. It's that idea that you can really get a lot of bang for your buck when you purchase these solutions. And we are not the only people who are developing curriculum around our resources. Tufts University is doing a phenomenal job of creating what they call their robotics playground placemats. And those placemats are just 2 Google slides that really introduce a challenge, an engineering challenge, get them to think about careers related to those challenges, and then give them some ideas on how they could build and even program it. So they're really great engineering challenges that go along with our resources as well. I like to leave people with this visual, because to me, this is that idea of low floor, limitless possibilities I started out with when we were first talking. There is so much you can do when you walk into a classroom with a resource that kids go, yes, you're here. Let's start learning, right? And that's what they do when you walk in with that LEGO resource. We have a high ceiling. We have intentionally worked hard at LEGO Education to develop these models, to develop these lessons in these units that really can take kids so far, right? With everything that we're putting in front of them. But it's even more important that we get out of their way. And once they start internalizing it, those are the wide walls I'm talking about. All of these things are things that have been developed by people using our Spike Prime, our 612 solution. And none of them have build instructions behind them. This is somebody saying, I have a problem I want to solve, and here's what I'm going to build to solve that problem. This is where I get excited to see where kids can go. If we can take those beautiful computer science standards that have been written for our state and embed them into those lessons throughout our classroom experiences, we can get kids who can do these things. We just have to give them the access and give them the chance to try. So thank you for listening. And Christy, thank you for fielding all the questions. Are there any that I should be addressing before?
I think I got to most of them, but there is one that I wanted to highlight.
Oh, nope, I'm on mute. Sorry, my bad.
That's okay. I will say Nicole asked a great question in the chat, and I wanted to kind of highlight that because she asked about the ratio for the sets. And the ratio for the sets is 2 students per 1 set.
Good point.
And that's with intentionality, because Colleen had mentioned earlier in her presentation that it's some of the soft skills that students are really needing to work on to make them career ready. And so by having students intentionally collaborate with these sets, with each other, with the lesson, it's really working to have them apply some of those soft skills. It's the collaboration, it's the communication, it's sharing with a peer. So it's such a great question. I mean, and it's easy to answer, oh, it's 2 to 1, but it's really with the intentionality that's the important part. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that for everyone.
Whenever I have a group of, had a group of 3 in the classroom too, I would have that group of 3 stick together and give them a second kit instead of having a group of 2 and a group of 1, because to me, the power is behind the communication and the collaboration that's taking place as they're building, right? And they're always so much more powerful when they're working together. Yeah, that is absolutely intentional on Lego's part.
Thank you, Nicole. It has been a joy to work with you in the chat today, I must say. Super fun.
Yeah, and I know what you mean about finding the time. I think that was why it was so important to me to point out how many standards each of these can address, right? It's that idea of you're going to be addressing some of these math standards. You're going to be addressing some of these literacy standards. Let's do it differently. You know what I mean? Here's a little bit different way of how you would address that standard, but in doing it, look how much more you get, because they also, and it goes back to that idea of schools have those outdated modes of approach, right? So by doing it this way, it's such an innovative way to approach those standards.
Yeah, and I think honestly, when we have some of the new, and it's still a theory for me, I haven't seen a lot of the work that's happening around the expanded math and ELA lessons, but I'm really excited about that because I think it then opens up the conversation to bring into some of those core classrooms to really support, supplement, and apply a lot of the learning that's happening. So
I think that was
I'm really excited about that.
I am too. I think that was one of the things too, when we rolled this out in my school district, we rolled it out across 15 schools at the elementary level within the science curriculum. And I remember somebody saying to me, you really expect teachers to teach robotics? All elementary teachers across our district to teach robotics? And my answer was no, I don't expect them to teach robotics. I expect them to teach science. They're going to use Lego as a resource to teach science, right? And when we took that off the plate, you know what I mean, and then brought it to the teachers that way, it wasn't scary. In fact, it was like, oh, this is kind of an exciting way to be able to teach science, right? And every single teacher did. And that was the part that I think got really exciting about it, you know. And I think the other part that was important was we didn't ask them to come up with a plan on how to use it. We gave them a plan. We gave them the lesson plans that have been developed by Lego for this. And I think that's the other part. I think that's what we recognize at Lego Education was so important, that teachers don't have the time to come up with these ideas themselves. We got to give them those ideas and give them those lesson plans behind those ideas to make it easier to be able to deliver it.
All right. Any other questions? How's
I
everyone
like your
feeling?
game plan, Nicole. I think that's awesome.
Good. And then always invite in your administrators too. After and when the kids are working, that is one of my biggest suggestions, because nothing speaks to what the kids can do is when an administrator comes in and sees a second grader programming in these like word blocks, and they're doing what? It just really speaks for itself and some of the really exciting things they can do. So,
and not just your administrators. I went to a fundraising breakfast at my former school district this week and sat at the table with the board members, 2 of the board members, and the board members were talking about experiences they had going into the classroom to see the kids doing some of these things, and that how excited they were to be able to go into the classroom and see it happening, you know. So yeah. And those are people who vote on whether or not you get the budgeting for this type of stuff. Yeah. So, you know, it really does have incredible power and speak for itself.
Invite up as high as you're willing to go.
And I'll have to say, the amount of funding that we got from our foundation to use with this was phenomenal as well. So yeah, reach out to Christy. Christy can definitely help you talk through, or Stephen for that matter, you know, how you can get that funding you need.
Yes. Well, thank you all for being with us today. I think we have answered all the questions, but by all means, my email is on the screen, probably on an invite as well. So I appreciate all of you coming, and we will hopefully be in touch soon.